Time now to break down some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Senators Derek Kitchen and Dan McKay. Gentlemen, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here today.
You know, I've always wanted a Senate-only show.
A Senate-only show?
We keep getting the House in here and it just messes
Well, we have
stuff
former Speaker Greg Hughes earlier, but this part reserved for the Senate.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're happy to be here.
Let's get into the big issues of the day. Let's start with that one, the race for governor. It's becoming a crowded field. Senator McKay, let's start with you. Assess this field for us moving into the race for governor.
This is an exciting time, honestly, for Utah. It has been a long time since we've had an open seat for the governor. You'll remember the last time we had it, John Huntsman Jr. was the candidate and I guess was the governor and won that race. And then Gary R. Herbert stepped in when Governor Huntsman stepped down. And it's been, what is that? I can't remember, is that 16 years since we've had a gubernatorial race? And
here we have John Huntsman Jr. in the race again.
I say he's back.
Yeah.
Right?
So what do you make of the field?
I love this field. I felt the same way about the Salt Lake City mayor race. The Salt Lake City mayor race had a lot of intelligent, hardworking, committed, passionate people that would be a real benefit to the city. And you'll see, I now see the same thing happening in the governor's race. I'm excited.
Okay, Senator Kitchen, let's bring you in.
I think it's a really important point that it's been over a decade since we had an open primary, right? And so I was thinking about this in terms of what SB 54 from a couple years ago means for electing the candidates on the Republican or the Democratic side, and the fact that you see these candidates going out there and choosing to gather signatures. Speaker Hughes, former Speaker Hughes, choosing on the contrary, not to actually, and to go through the convention route. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how this difference in process allows them to sort of take different positions within the Republican field. And unfortunately, you and I were speaking about this earlier. But
yeah, I want to get your point on this because I hate to say this, but it is reality. The winner of the Republican primary is going to move on and be the governor of the state of Utah. So does that motivate Democrats then to register as Republicans to have a say in the governor's race?
Well, frankly, I look to people like my grandma or friends of mine that are either independent or registered as Democrats, and they all want to participate in electing the next governor. And I think that you see people like John Huntsman and Spencer Cox attract a lot of Democrats, or at least interest from Democrats. Whether or not they go through the administrative process of having to register as a Republican and then unregister is another story. I don't know if people are going to actually go through with that. So I think it'll be minor.
Do you see that happening, and what impact could it potentially have?
Research shows that that's only a minor thing. People chosen their party, they chose their affiliation, and they stay there in that lane regardless of that switch. But what will be very interesting is new registered voters, because we have a lot of people growing in the state, and how they choose to register in a very contentious race. Because you have a contentious race on the Democratic primary side for president, and if you participate in the Democratic president race, you will forego the opportunity to be in the Republican governor's race on the primary side. And so the ability to kind of pick which race matters to you most, it's interesting. I love it.
Okay, let's get predictions. Who rises to the top of this field? Who do you see rising?
I think it's Cox and Huntsman, for sure.
And I'm going to go a little bit different, and I'm going to say, because of the racist dynamics and plurality being what it is, I think it is Greg Hughes and Thomas Wright.
Wow, okay.
And the reason I say that is the winner is going to have 20%, 22%.
Right.
Right? That's the winner.
So you're saying you see one of those two coming out of the primary?
I see one of those coming out of the primary.
Okay, very interesting. We'll see how that goes. Let's move on to Salt Lake City, a new administration taking over there. What should we expect as we transition from the Biskupski to the Mendenhall administration?
Well, after the election in November, the transition had already begun quietly. And so I expect that what we're going to see is no real hiccups in the process. I actually expect Mayor Mendenhall now to continue to focus on things like air quality and transportation. Housing is going to be a big issue. So I'm expecting that some of the priorities are going to stay the same, but I think that you're going to see Mayor Mendenhall double down on things like air quality.
What about relationships with the state? Because we saw Mayor Biskupski have heated disputes with elected officials, particularly the governor. We saw the governor show up at Aaron Mendenhall's election night. We saw him show up at the inauguration and play the piano. Is that going to sour eventually, or is there going to be a better relationship there?
I think that this is why Aaron won. she won based on her ability to build relationships. I think that the inland port, no matter how controversial it was, the rank and file voters in Salt Lake City saw that she was willing to step up and get a better shake out of a bad deal for Salt Lake City residents, and that she was really leaning on her relationships. So I actually see that the next 4 years under Mayor Mendenhall are going to be really solid for Salt Lake City.
Your thoughts?
I hope it's 8 years. Honestly, I think 12. I would just say the Mayor Mendenhall brings an exciting, I think, different perspective in kind of getting things done. It always reminds me, you know, Salt Lake City goes through these political winds back and forth. At one point, they want to protest and be angry at the state, and then you get a protest angry mayor. And then everybody gets sick of that, and then they want a productive, you know, let's get things done type of thing. And it's always Salt Lake City trying to decide who it's going to be. And honestly, it's my favorite element of Salt Lake City politics.
Let's move on to tax reform, another big issue that'll continue to develop as we go into the legislative session. We have, in the two of you, someone who voted no for the bill and someone who voted yes for the bill. One of the big controversies there was how the impact it would have on education funding. Yeah. We just saw the governor come out during the week with $292 million in new funds for education for a total of $4.9 billion. How does that bolster the argument on either side of this education development?
I think Governor Herbert is responding to concerns from the electorate at large that through tax reform that we're going to see a decrease in education funding. There's a lot of concern about the removal of the earmark for education in the income tax. I'm happy to see that there's a proposed increase for education. The problem here is that the voters in Utah, most people here in the state, don't trust the legislature to stick to that year over year. And so I think that there's, again, the biggest concern here is the removal of the earmark. And so I'm not entirely sure that the governor's budget will be sufficient.
Senator McKay, you voted for the bill. Mm-hmm. Do you believe education will continue to be sufficiently funded?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think the governor's reacting at all. In fact, I think the governor and the legislature likewise has always funded education as a top priority. If you look at the percentage of our budget compared to where it is, when you compare it to percentages of other states who have higher per pupil funding, we're always highest in the country. We're really close to the top of who prioritizes it the most. And so I think this is just continuing that trend. And I think if we had not seen a foundational change where we fixed the general fund, be able to pay for roads and have a diversified revenue source for the state, if we hadn't fixed that, there's no way the governor could make that commitment, because the money that the governor wants to put into the 4.5% that he wants to put in the WPU might not be sustainable when income tax drops if we have a recession. And so I think having a recession, those types of things are shored up now that we've moved the revenue around.
Your thoughts of that? Because that was a lot of the talk as in times of recession, but income tax, it is shown, goes down in time of recession as well.
Actually, I think Senator McKay makes a really important point that there was a.
You're not supposed to say that.
His point might be right on. There's a structural issue, and we have a changing economy, and so being mindful of that and setting a tax base so setting a structure out that allows for flexibility as our economy continues to grow and change. This is happening globally, by the way, and so to have that conversation, I think, has been an important piece of what the legislature at least tried to do. A lot of the voters in the state of Utah, and especially in my district, which is Salt Lake City, are frustrated with the process and the lack of input that they felt like they received. And now I know that there was a lot of input solicited by the legislature, by this committee.
But we could do more.
But it needed to happen. It needed to go deeper. Does
reality is this isn't over, though, right? You're going to address this in the legislative session.
This is just one of the many ways that we're going to address it. Okay. But I think, Senator Kitchen, honestly, if you answer this, if we were king for a day of the state of Utah and we could write our own tax bill about how the policy would be, it would be different than what was passed, clearly. And I can honestly say, while I voted for the bill, it would still be different than it would, because I would just do it differently.
Okay. We're going to have to end it on that note.
Oh, darn it.
Great conversation. Yeah. Appreciate both of you being here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.